Ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, welcome to the 97 Republic YouTube channel, where I react to news and live events of different sports. So I kindly ask that you hit the like button and the subscribe button, as that will really help this channel grow. And to ensure you don't skip a beat, click the notification bell as well. That way you can guarantee that you don't miss any of the action. Alright, so let's go. Some negativity surrounding the UFC 312 card. And I watch a lot of media related content regarding the UFC, and basically what I tend to do is I tend to go to the comment section and I like to hear people's opinions and I like to see people's perspectives. And a lot of people mentioning the fact that there's a lack of star power regarding this particular card. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. We basically have the main event and co-main event that's really considered to be filled with household names. But Australia never seems to disappoint. But every event held in Australia tends to really captivate the fans. If we look at Izzy and Sean, if we look at Volkanovski and Makachev, we're usually in for a spectacle. And I don't think it's going to be any different. When we look at both sides of this coin, so either you have a lot of household names, a lot of star power on the card, and basically already established fan bases for the respective fighter. When you don't have that, it provides an opportunity for people that hasn't really solidified themselves as being a UFC star. So basically giving guys the opportunity to reinvent themselves and to reinvigorate their UFC careers. And giving them the opportunity to put on a great performance and put on a spectacle for the fans, and basically draw much more attention to themselves rather than the card being filled with a lot of star power and with a lot of household names. And I do think that is what the UFC is intending on doing. So either you have a lot of names that draws the majority of the attention, or you have some names and then the other fighters are able to draw some attention to themselves based on their performance, whether it's a spectacular knockout, whether it is a dominant win, just absolute dominance for the entirety of the fight. And looking at the matchups for UFC 312, I do think that we might see some potential stars in the making. So all in all, extremely excited for the UFC 312 card. Now looking at the co-main event, I haven't spoken about it at all. Now when looking at the fight itself, when looking at both Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez for the Women's Strawweight Championship, basically analyzing both of their respective UFC careers, looking at where they struggled, looking at their stylistic matchup, and looking at their strengths and weaknesses, starting off with both women's record inside of the UFC. Now Zhang Weili has had 11 fights inside of the UFC. And Tatiana Suarez has had 7, where Zhang Weili has won 9 of her fights inside of the UFC and lost 2. Tatiana has yet to lose inside of the UFC. And with regards to momentum heading into this fight, it is difficult to argue for either side, due to the fact that, well, obviously Tatiana has never lost inside of the UFC. Zhang Weili has won 4 consecutive fights, and the last 3 of them has been title fights. So difficult to make an argument for both, because which carries more weight? It's the old debate: will rather be champion or rather be undefeated. And when looking at Zhang Weili's UFC career, those 2 losses have both come to Rose number units. So if we had to extract Rose from the UFC and the history of the UFC, Zhang Weili is yet to lose inside of the UFC, where Tatiana Suarez is yet to lose regardless inside of the UFC. But a very different road and journey inside of the UFC, where obviously Zhang Weili has been very active and has fought basically everyone the strawweight division had to offer, where Tatiana was incredibly dominant and then suffered some few setbacks outside of the UFC and basically had to recover and regroup and reinvent herself inside of the UFC. So if you're unfamiliar with the story, Tatiana Suarez fought in 2019. And after that fight, during the duration of from 2019 to 2023, she had two major setbacks. One being diagnosed with thyroid cancer, which is horrible. And when she managed to overcome a thyroid cancer, when she got treatment for it, then the next setback happened where she needed surgery on her knee. So basically losing 4 years of what could be, now I'm not saying her prime, but what could have been really helpful with regards to her development inside of the UFC. But in 2023, she made a comeback, and she's managed to beat Montana De La Rosa as well as Jessica Andrade, and now basically fights Zhang Weili for the strawweight belt. And with regards to Zhang Weili, I mean, she has fought every single opponent the strawweight division has to offer with regards to potential number one contenders. That she's beaten Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who's probably one of the best strawweights, if not the best strawweight in the UFC's history. She's beaten Jessica Andrade, who is built like a fridge with legs and arms. She's fought Rose Namajunas. She's beaten Carla Esparza. She's beaten Amanda Lemos. Even Yan Xiaonan. She's seen a lot of competition with regards to stylistic matchups and just individuals that you can fight inside of the UFC. So with regards to momentum, it's difficult to see and to genuinely say which is the bigger influence. Is it being undefeated, or is it being, the champion and winning 3 consecutive championship bouts entering this fight? Now, with regards to stylistic matchup, I think for both women, this will be their toughest test to date. Seeing that from Tatiana's perspective, Zhang Weili is probably pound for pound right now the best woman fighter in the UFC and probably in the world. And due to the fact that her fight IQ is probably the best inside of the women's division. It's basically between her and Valentina Shevchenko. But what you've seen and the fact that she can adapt within a fight and basically move away from her opponent's strengths and basically focus in on their weakness. And we saw it with the Yan Xiaonan fight, where for a few fights inside of the UFC, we've seen Zhang Weili get outstruck and basically having the disadvantage when the fight plays out on the feet. And apart from the Rose fight, Zhang Weili was able to basically alter the fight and have it go in her way and have it favor her in whichever stylistic matchup she would like it to be. So when she fought Yan Xiaonan in a previous fight, she got outstruck and basically she reverted back to wrestling and wrestled Xiaonan, ended up winning the fight. And when she fought Jessica Andrade, outstruck Andrade. When she fought Jędrzejczyk, did the same. So she's an incredible fighter with regards to both striking and grappling. Have both in her repertoire of skills and can basically lean on anyone if needed, if the fight plays out in the way that she would not prefer it to play out. Where Tatiana is extremely dominant, an extremely strong woman, and her fundamentals being grappling and wrestling, she uses it. And she uses it to wear out her opponents, and she is really a big submission threat, where she has one of the best guillotines in the women's division, period. Whatever weight class, she has one of the strongest guillotines probably ever seen inside of the women's division. And she finishes her fights. Out of her 7 victories, 5 of them have come by a stoppage. So she's an extremely dominant fighter, something that Weili has not seen before. Yes, sure, Weili has seen Jessica Andrade, but Andrade doesn't really utilize her wrestling as much as Tatiana's whole game is predicated on using wrestling. So with regards to Weili, Tatiana would definitely be her toughest opponent yet. They're facing someone that dominant, that enforced their will however they see fit on everybody that she has faced. And with regards to Tatiana facing Weili, she's never fought someone with such a high fight IQ. She's never fought someone that is such a good striker. And basically, almost as good of a wrestler as she is a striker, it is obvious to say. And no style points in saying that Tatiana is the better wrestler and Zhang Weili is the better striker. If you say that, not even a round of applause. It's obvious. But with regards to the other side of it, right? How good does Zhang Weili's wrestling match up with Tatiana's strike? And I think Zhang Weili has the upper hand when it comes to overall being a great fighter. But you don't have to be overall a great fighter. If you're so dominant in your craft, you don't need anything else. I mean, we've seen it with Habib. Habib didn't have to be a good stand-up striker. He could have no stand-up skills, no stand-up striking. He could basically not have trained boxing for a day in his entire life and still be able to be 29-0 just due to the fact that his wrestling, there's no remedy for it, there's no counter for it. It's so dominant that he needs nothing else. And with regards to Tatiana's wrestling, might be the same case. It might be the same case. So, stylistically, the toughest opponent for both respective women going into this fight. Now, I think the main topic of discussion regarding the co-main event should be experience versus determination. Seeing that all of the other things are relatively similar, this is the one where we have a big discrepancy between both women. Where with regards to experience, Zhang Weili has about as much experience as you could possibly need going into a championship fight. Due to the fact that, first off, she's been in a lot of championship fights. Secondly, she's fought every stylistic matchup you could probably face inside of the UFC, as I previously mentioned. She fought the wrestler, Carla Esparza. She's fought the striker, Jacek, and Rose Namajunas. She's fought the mixture of both striking and wrestling and Jessica Andrade. She's seen it all. And not just regards to her opponent, but regarding the fight itself. She's been in a lot of 5-round fights. Against Yan Xiaonan, 5-round fight. Against Amanda Lemos prior to that fight, 5-round fight. Against Rose Namajunas, 5-round fight. The first fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, 5-round fight. So she knows her limitations regarding a 5-round fight. Knows what pace is actually sustainable and what she can and cannot do inside of a 5-round fight. Where this will be the first time Tatiana fights in a 5-round fight, and probably the first time that she'll see the championship rounds, because I don't think either woman is getting finished inside of the first 3 rounds. So Tatiana will see the 5th and probably the 4th round for the first time in her UFC career. And it is a big difference. The pace you set, how sustainable it is, how good your cardio is, how you easily tire yourself out without even knowing it. I think experience plays a massive role in this fight. And obviously Zhang Weili has the benefit of being a much more experienced fighter. And along with her fight IQ, I think she has a big advantage with regards to experience. But then we look at determination, we look at Tatiana's side. How do you stop someone that is so determined to get what they feel like they deserve? Meaning that nobody has been able to stop Tatiana Suarez. No person. The only thing that has been able to somewhat stop and somewhat prevent her from reaching her goals is things outside of the UFC. Where obviously, as previously mentioned, but how do you stop someone that seems to be unstoppable? How do you stop the unstoppable force? Because all of these characteristics, willpower, determination, it's all intangible. There's no way that you can rationalize how much or how big of an influence it has. But seeing someone being so determined to go through adversity, the amount of times Tatiana Suarez has gone through adversity and stand up and continue fighting has to be worrisome for Zhang Weili. Would not bet on this fight with someone else's money, because I don't really see who you could favor. Obviously, you could pick experience and think that it has more influence, or you can go for determination, seeing that it just feels inevitable. It feels like destiny. You can make an argument for both, but trying to predict a winner, it's difficult. It's difficult to actually think what you would hold to a higher regard with regards to both women and their respective skill set. I don't know, but I would love to hear your opinion. I would love to hear your answer, your thought process. Who do you think is going to win the co-main event? Would you rather back experience, or would you back just pure willpower, determination, going through adversity and just not taking no for an answer, relentlessness? What do you think has more power? Let me know.